প্ৰিয় শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল, কৃষ্ণকান্ত সন্দিকৈ ৰাজ্যিক মুক্ত বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ বিদ্যায়তনিক দৃশ্য শ্ৰাব্য অনুষ্ঠানটিলৈ আপোনালোকক স্বাগতম জনাইছো। স্বয়ং প্ৰভা DTH চেনেল 20ৰ যোগেদি শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকলৰ অধ্যয়ন কাৰ্য অধিক মনোগ্ৰাহী আৰু ফলপ্ৰসূ হোৱালৈ লক্ষ্য ৰাখি বিভিন্ন বিষয় সামৰি আমাৰ এই বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটি সজোৱা হৈছে। আহকচোন প্ৰিয় দৰ্শকসকল, আমাৰ আজিৰ খণ্ডটিৰ মাজলৈ আগবাঢ়ো।
Hello everyone. I am Trisha Dowerah from the Bhupen Hazarika School of Mass Communication, Krishna Kanta State Open University. And I'd like to welcome you all once again to another informative online class. In today's online discussion, we are going to talk about Unit 3 of the paper Traditional Folk Media, which belongs to third semester of BA program in Journalism and Mass Communication under Krishna Kanta State Open University. In the previous two units, that is Unit 1 and 2, you were introduced briefly about what traditional media is all about. In today's particular unit, in Unit 3, we shall talk about the history and growth of traditional media in India, a brief overview of some of the traditional folk media forms of India, as well as the impact electronic media has on traditional media. And finally, we shall look into some of the applications of the traditional media for the purpose of development. Now, when we talk about traditional media, what does come to our mind? Traditional media is something that has been passed down generation after generation. Now, each culture have their own traditions, which are actually given or passed on from one generation to another generation. Initially, we didn't used to have electricity or other technological tools at our disposal. And thereby, we didn't have any electronic media, or for that purpose, any specific, media which is based on electronic forms for the purpose of entertainment or information. Now, have you really wondered how the messages were communicated at that point of time, when there was no such specific media, when there was no specific medium of communication, medium of channel? Well, there was indeed communication was there, but there was no such technology-enhanced media, technology-enabled communication tools or, channels through which such messages could be communicated. In fact, such messages were communicated by ways of, word-of-mouth publicity, by way of, oral communication. And so the people, they used to adopt different ways of communication in the form of songs. There were dances, there were musics, there was drama, there were stories and puppet shows and so on and so forth. Because, people, since we live in a society, so we have the innate, interest or ability to communicate with one another. And so there were different mediums apart from electronic media, how people used to communicate. And even the stories which we are talking about, the oral traditions, oral forms that could not be documented, they were spread through this different forms of media. And even during these days also, we have different, such kind of communication tools at our disposal. Even the remote interior villages, where you don't find the proper electronic media, or you don't have a proper online-based media to communicate. People make use of such folk forms, different folk art forms, different folk dances, different folk songs to communicate with one another. And have you ever remembered, when you were small, or at one point of time, your grandparents or maybe your parents, they might have told you the different stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana, or other moral tales, and have you actually enjoyed a live performance of drama in your village or any other area where you reside? How was it narrated to you? How was it communicated to you? Now, when your grandparents or when for that matter, your parents, they narrated the stories of our, folk forms and all, definitely they didn't make use of any, electronic media forms. They were told to you in face-to-face mode, in oral mode. So, oral traditions, oral folk forms, folk dances, folk songs, folk dramas, puppet shows, these are the other different forms through which, different kinds of information are being communicated. And this fall under the umbrella of traditional folk media. Now, let us try to understand how the traditional media in India has evolved over the years, the history and growth of traditional media in India. Now, when we talk about the history actually dates back to those ancient times when people they began to understand the value of civilization and organized living. And folk art, it was not born out of suddenly in one particular day. People actually felt the need for entertainment, for satisfying the creative urge to express and to remain united as a society. Now, as far as the McBride Commission report of 1982 is concerned, which is actually known as Many Voices, One World, and communication actually became institutionalized in traditional societies. This particular report says. And interpersonal communication and public institution communication in a form of transmission of norms and customs, it grew in professional categories of people. In course of time, it came to be responsible for the transmission of certain types of messages. And when we talk about the different categories of professional people, there might be, sorcerers, tribal chiefs, traveling merchants. It may be they may be local administrators. They may be dancers, scribes, and so on and so forth. And as far as India is concerned, the folk traditions, it grew parallel across the country in different forms, basically catering to the needs and preferences of the people belonging to different age groups, belonging to different regions, and actually giving a creative satisfaction and simple joys to the people. Because you see, we do have print media, we do have electronic media, and we do have online media. Then why do we need the importance, or why do we need traditional folk media? There is definitely an important point in that. Traditional folk media gives us a sense of belongingness. It makes us feel that we are a part of the society. Because traditional folk media, it makes use of the traditional forms of communicating with one another, unlike other electronic media forms. Because electronic media, there is hardly any contact in real time with one another. Of course, these days we have online way of chatting with one another, we have online way of interacting with one another. But having said that, keeping that aside, the traditional folk media, it makes us feel that we are communicating with a person in real time, because a person is in front of us. And the different forms or different the messages that have been transmitted to different folk forms are very much a part of the society, and that makes us feel a part of the society. Now, according to Malhan is he was a very renowned a media personality, and in 1985 he has enlisted 3 or at the most 4 different forms of traditional media. The first important form which he has highlighted is the action-oriented folk arts and verbal musical forms. When we talk about action-oriented, it means that the folk art forms or the different folk media forms are accompanied by action. Like we have rural theatre, there is puppetry, there is discourses, there are folk songs, the ballads, storytelling, and so on and so forth. And the second important form or a type of traditional media as given by Malhan is the audience situations like festivals and fairs, social, ritual, and ceremonial gatherings and meets. Because you see, it's not often that it's not only that we gain different forms of information, we gain different knowledge only by getting through different folk media forms, or maybe through different print media forms or electronic media forms. We also get some amount of idea or some amount of information we get by attending different festivals as well as different fairs, different ceremonial gatherings. Because when we attend the different festivals and fairs, we get brief idea of what the situation is all about, the different actions that take place at such a place or such an occasion. It enlightens us. It gives us a bird's eye view of what the situation might be. Third important type which Malhan has enlisted are the opinion leaders, like the village heads. Okay, Now, in most of the villages, especially in rural areas, we have the village chieftain is there, the village heads are there. So what they do, they act like opinion leaders. Now, opinion leaders, the main function is like, they try to inform the general public as a whole. They give their own opinion because the information they collect from the different media channels, they use it for their own purpose, and then they try to percolate that particular message down to the bottom level, and they disseminate that particular message to the people at the lower level. So they play the important role of an opinion leader. Lastly, we have the rural arts and crafts, traditional designs and miscellaneous motifs. Now, when we talk about rural arts and crafts, and because art, the crafts of different regions are different. For instance, if you talk about Assam, we have our own traditional art and crafts. If you talk about the art and crafts of Rajasthan, they have their own indigenous art and crafts. So the different traditional designs, the different motifs, they kind of bring out a different identity of the particular state or the region. So rural arts and crafts are also one type of traditional folk media form. Now, this different traditional media forms which Malhan has enlisted, they not only give a sense of information, but they also provide us a type of mass entertainment, and they serve as indigenous tools of interpersonal and intergroup communication, more specifically in the rural areas. And as time has gone by, in due course of time, different regions develop specialized regional folk media like the Tamasha, Maharashtra, the Jatra, Bengal, and Yakshagana of Karnataka, which actually acted as communication channels for heralding the reform, social changes, and development in the Indian society. And there's different folk forms. We have different folk dances, different folk songs, folk theatre, puppetry, the traditional art forms. They all have been used at some point or other for social, cultural, religious, as well as political purposes. And not only that, it also they have been used for providing pure entertainment or purpose also. Now, and these different folk forms, the different types of traditional folk media forms, it's not that they caters to a particular age group, because they are so much indigenous in nature, and the different socially relevant messages which different folk forms they try to disseminate are so much related to our own lifestyle, our own way of living. So that makes us feel that we have a sense of belongingness, or we feel that we belong to whatever message that these different folk forms they try to disseminate. And traditional media, basically it's a beautiful area of dance. There is music, there is songs, there are prayers, there are different moral lessons to know, there's epic, there's mythology. And another important fact about this traditional folk media forms is that most of the time, the medium of communication is their own native language or their own regional language. Hardly there are one or two instances where English has been used as a medium of communication, because usually people feel more connected when such kind of information is passed down or disseminated to the people in their own native languages, in their own regional language. So definitely people will not, it's not only that people will be able to understand a better way the topic which such kind of messages are being disseminated, but the people also will feel that, okay, our own society is being depicted in such a way that because we are part of the society, so my lifestyle is being depicted in this way, so I will be more interested in whatever message this different traditional folk media forms tries to convey to us. Now, there's another very senior folk media scholar. His name is Balwan Gargi. He has actually defined traditional folk media form as, he says in his own words, quote unquote, that folk media represents the people in their natural habitat with all their contradictions and multifarious activities. It gives a glimpse of their style of speech, music, dance, dress, and wisdom. So what he exactly means is that it represents the people folk media doesn't only represent that, people are working in some place. People might be working in their respective workplace. People might be at their own residences. People might have gone for visiting some other place. So they might be at their own respective place doing their different activities. And folk media represents the people at their own natural setting. Okay, it shows their way of the style of how they're communicating. It shows their way of communicating through the medium of dance, through the medium of music, what dress code they are using, what information they are passing down from one generation. So this different areas, or this different multifarious activities are being highlighted by the folk media. Now let us try to see some of the important traditional folk media forms of India. Now first, of course, we have the folk theatre. And folk theatre is a composite form in all the regions. It combines dance, music, art, dialogues, poetry, and even folklore. And in some places, the themes which they are taken, for the folk theatre performances, they're taken from mythological characters. There might be mythological stories or different folk tales or legends and all. They try to disseminate some kind of social messages, or sometimes it's been satirized contemporary scenario as well. For instance, in north part of India, we have the Nautanki and the Ram Lila. They're very popular folk theatre forms. And as far as Eastern India is concerned, we have the Jatra and farther towards east in Assam, we have the Ankya Nath. So these are some of the very popular folk theatre forms. And another important, of course, there are other different folk theatre forms as well in the entire country. We have in Gujarat, we have the Bhavai, and then towards in Tamasha also we have. Then Nautanki, basically it's another folk theatre form which is performed in North India in open stages, and it also draws narratives from epics as well as folklores and heroic tales, and they're actually used to make social and political comments. And on the other hand, Jatra is very much popular in Bengal, Orissa and Assam, and it actually got its name from the nomadic nature of the performers who travel from place to place. They give different performances, and because the nomads, Jatra means you're moving from one place to another, literally translated. And so from that particular action, from that particular activity, the name Jatra has been coined. And this form, it became very much popular among the communists, more specifically to spread the socially relevant messages in both pre and post independence India. Then the second important folk form or traditional folk form of India is they're the folk songs. Now I think we don't need much introduction about the folk songs. I think by now you must have understood what folk songs are all about. And as far as India is concerned, we have a very rich collection of folk songs. And Professor Swayam Prabha, he's a renowned person belonging to this field of media and journalism, and he has actually divided the different folk forms into the following types. Okay. He has said the first important type which he has focused upon are the bhakti songs or the devotional songs with which has very strong links to classical music. Then we have the ceremonial songs or the other, which include other seasonal songs also, or ritual works and all. And the ceremonial songs basically those are sung during certain ceremonies and all. For instance, the birth of a child, or maybe to celebrate the 6 months completion of the birth of a child, where the child is being given the first few morsels of food to eat. So during certain ceremonies and all, or maybe even during marriage functions and all, during marriage ceremonies and so on. So those ceremonies which has some kind of value, or maybe which has some kind of relation to the Indian society, highlighting any particular occasion. During those occasions also, such ceremonial songs are being sung very very occasionally. Then of course we have the tribal songs. So these are some of the three important folk songs that are being highlighted. And there are also other important popular folk songs, which includes the Baul and the Bhatyali of Bengal, the Doharas and the Garba of Gujarat, and of course in Assam we have the Bihu. So the main objective of such folk songs is that they not only serve as a purpose of entertainment, they not only give a sense of happiness, but they have a kind of relevance to the society. Now, what is that relevance? They try to integrate different issues that actually takes place in society, and they try to disseminate, or they try to focus on those issues through the different folk songs, because the different folk songs, they express socially significant messages, and actually they have been used to foster a sense of national pride and integration. The third important form of folk songs are the narrative forms. Now, what are narratives actually? Narratives means like when you talk about folk songs now, it's not only about there is music in it, there are lyrics in it, someone is singing the song, but sometimes the folk songs can be in a form of narrative forms, where someone is reading out the different lyrics, or someone is narrating out the different story behind that occasion. So those falls on the narrative forms. And poetic forms with a strong narrative element, they have actually proved to be a particularly useful form from the point of view of communication of messages. Then lastly, we have the religious discourses. Religious discourses, or popularly be known as Harikatha, that is, of course, it's known by different names like Katha, we have Kirtan, we have Katha Kalakshepam and Pravachan. It involves a kind of dramatic exposition of stories and songs. And generally it is seen in such type of religious discourses, the performer, the person who is actually trying to convey the different issues, he is known as a Kathakar actually, and he is actually expected to have a good amount of knowledge of the different scriptures, because he'll be narrating those scriptures on different occasions, because people will be there. So when the person who is actually narrating this such kind of stories to the general public, he or she should have a very good amount of knowledge about the scriptures, about the music, about the qualities of a good actor, as well as a proper knowledge of local customs. Because suppose someone from Bengal comes to Assam and he or she tries to engage in religious discourses, so obviously the person from Bengal must understand what is happening in Assam. Without he or she, if he starts speaking on different religious issues without even considering the sentiments of the local people, then that would not be healthy in the long run. So a proper knowledge of the local customs, along with proper knowledge of the scriptures as well as music, is very essential to make the religious discourse very appealing to the general public. And then we have the folk dances, of course. From the term itself, we can understand folk dances means they are those dance forms which try to imbibe or try to convey the different issues or different socially relevant issues or different folk forms. And folk dance forms, for instance, we take about let's take the example Bihu dance from Assam. Bihu dance in Upper Assam is a little bit different than the Lower Assam, but nevertheless they convey the same amount of meaning. And Bihu actually signifies the essence of being an Assamese, the essence of the state of Assam. It signifies the cultural beauty of Assam. It signifies the natural beauty of Assam. So every nuances, every step in this particular folk dance performance, it glorifies the cultural heritage, or it glorifies the cultural beauty of Assam. So different dance forms, different folk dance forms, they have such kind of, it tries to disseminate such kind of meaning to the society. And such traditional folk dance forms are fundamentally very much similar, but of course they have different names and are performed in different styles. Okay, they're different style of performing. What may be, what might see someone see the Bihu dance performance as seen in the lower part of Assam might not be a bit similar to that what that one visualizes in the upper part of Assam. So there might be some differences, minor differences, but nevertheless the amount of meaning or whatever content they try to convey it remains the same. Then we have the traditional motifs and symbols. Now, as a layman, I'm sure you must have seen, in most of the houses, most specifically in the rural areas, you might have seen, people used to make little small dots of rangoli with different colors, and outside their homes, even during festive occasions. Most specifically, I think during Diwalis and all, I think most of us, we used to make the alpana, by trying to draw it on the veranda of our house. We try to welcome Goddess Lakshmi. So this kind of occasions, when we try to kind of generate, why we do such kind of patterns, why are we engaging in doing such kind of symbols and motifs and all. We have a different folk dancers, we have different folk forms, we do have different folk theatre forms to give us a sense of entertainment, to spread the knowledge, to give us some kind of information. But why do we still engage in such kind of traditional in drawing out such kind of traditional symbols and motifs? Because these are part of our everyday life, and this different beautiful patterns which actually are made on the threshold of the house, and they actually it's again a belief. It helps us like to uplift the spirit, or maybe ward off evil energies and give protection. And as far as India is concerned, people revere many such kind of symbols, ranging from those which are very much simple kind of symbols to some very complex kind of symbols, and which might be in the form of figures and ritual drawings and so on and so forth. So that is how people that try to communicate to traditional motifs and symbols, because people want that through such traditions, they want the tradition to remain alive. Because in this particular age of electronic media, most of the time we find that such traditional forms of communication have actually come down to a certain degree. So people want to keep them alive. People want to make it a kind of to uplift or to take it to another level, the different traditional folk forms, and that is why they try to engage in such kind of different folk forms. Then we have the paintings. Now paintings are also one of the important mediums of traditional media, because painting is not only something which is colorful. It's not that I have painted a picture of an apple, or I have painted a picture of a scenery of a person riding a bike, or maybe a person swimming in the river. It's not that. There has to be some kind of inherent meaning to that, okay, because it tries to highlight certain important social issues. In the earlier times, how the primitive man, they used to communicate. They used to draw, they used to paint in those huge caves. They used to paint the pictures of animals being hunted. They used to draw with the help of the sharp edged stone on the rocks and all. They used to show the which way the animals can be seen, or how the hunting takes place. So this kind of different communication, the way of communicating certain issues, or way of communicating certain kind of any occasion, people used to take the help of painting. And it's not that painting, they used to use different colored paints, or there used to be different kind of colors while drawing out such kind of issues or such kind of instances. It was just simple. They used to just take a sharp edged rock, or maybe a sharp edged maybe something which is very sharp in nature, and they used to just carve out a kind of any image that might come to their mind, and through that particular image they used to communicate. And from that point of time to the present time, we have actually come a long way. And at that point of time, of course, the medium of communication was basically to inform the people that were about what activity they are being engaged. Of course, now the situation has actually changed. It's not about we don't go about painting on different rocks or different caves and all, and inform the people where we are. That's a different issue. But the thing is that the communication is still there. The communication is still prevalent, even though the nature of communication or the issues to which we are communicating, the way of painting might have changed, but the primary focus remains the same. Okay. Now, let us try to understand, look at some of the examples of traditional paintings, which actually symbolizes deep meaning. Now, we have the traditional paintings of Madhya Pradesh, especially the wall paintings of Bundelkhand in Chhattisgarh, and Gondwana in Nimar Malwa. They are the living expressions of people actually who are linked with the socio-cultural environment of the area. Then, for instance, the Bhils and the Bhilala tribes of Madhya Pradesh, they used to paint myths that's related to the creation called Pithora paintings. They used to carve out different paintings on the horses, on elephants, on tigers, on birds, on gods, man, objects of daily life, and so on and so forth. And the Gondwana region as well, there used to be unmatched creative vision has been shown by the Gond and the Pardhan tribes, who have actually impressed audiences at different exhibitions in Japan, in France, in Australia, and in other countries as well. Then let's come to puppetry. Now, when we talk about puppetry, what comes to our mind? Puppetry, they are a kind of, it tries to not only entertain the people, it tries to give us, a sense of understanding of any particular issue, because it also conveys social messages. And generally, when we talk about puppetry in India, we have three important types. First, we have the string puppets, then we have the rod puppets, then finally we have the glove puppets. And the person who actually manages the different puppets, he can be a single man performing the shows, or a group of artists, or a family of artists who are performing it at different places using the colorful puppets. And the different themes of this puppets for this different puppetry shows are also different as per the region and the traditions.
ইমান সময় আমি স্বয়ং প্ৰভা DTH চেনেল 20 যোগে সম্প্ৰচাৰিত কৃষ্ণকান্ত সন্দিকৈ ৰাজ্যিক মুক্ত বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটিৰ আজিৰ খণ্ডটি উপভোগ কৰিলো। এই বিদ্যায়তনিক অনুষ্ঠানটিৰ জৰিয়তে শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল নিশ্চয়কৈ ভালেখিনি উপকৃত হৈছে। পুনৰ আন এটি বিষয় লৈ আমি আপোনালোকৰ মাজলৈ আহিম। নমস্কাৰ।